Welcome to everybody to Inside Boxing Daily on the Grueling Truth Sports Network, brought to you by the Sheridan Report. Make sure you check out Bobby Sheridan on Twitter, at Sheridan Report, or on the internet, on his website, The Sheridan Report. I'm your co-host for Inside Boxing Daily, Mike Goodpaster. Like now, I would like to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good evening, everybody. Happy to be on. Always happy to be on. Always happy to talk boxing with you, Mike. Let's go.
Yeah, not a lot of boxing news today, but we'll start off with, did you see the press conference for Anthony Joshua and Jarrell Miller?
Oh, dude, you can't get away from it. I mean,
I haven't seen it yet because I've had other shit to do other than watch people try to build up a fight with a fake fight before the fight.
Try to get those DAZN subscribers.
Yeah, another 10. That's all they need is another 10.
Yeah. I didn't watch the press conference. I never do because I honestly don't care. All that pre-fight buildup is largely immaterial to me, except if they do, like HBO with their 24/7s. Those are really good and worthwhile. The shows at Showtime would do. All those were worthwhile. I like those a lot. I mean, well done, well narrated, on and on and on. But all this, sitting at a press conference and watching people ask him questions that most of us really don't care about. To me, it's boring. But, obviously the highlight of that was Miller pushing Anthony Joshua. And again, it's all for show, really. But I also heard that Jarrell Miller called him an Uncle Tom. And if I'm not mistaken, that is not the first time a black American has called a black British guy an Uncle Tom. I think McCall did it with Bruno as well. So those two things were semi-interesting, I suppose. Again, whether you don't like the word or whatnot, I honestly don't care. Again, they're trying to sell tickets. They need those DAZN subscribers. And actually, I got to commend Joshua because he was pretty cool about the whole situation. Once Miller pushed him, Joshua didn't get too heated. He didn't, make a big fuss about it. It was just pretty much like, hey, move back out of the way and let me get back in this guy's face. I think during the questioning he called him a bitch or something like that, like he was going to knock that bitch out.
That's
so it was
original.
Yeah, very well. Joshua's not.
He should have told him he was going to smack the tits off of him. That would be entertaining. Instead of calling him a bitch, just look at him, maybe reach over and give him a purple nurple and tell him he's going to slap the tits off of him.
Yeah, no, I would have been into that. But Anthony
Why, do you want to slap the tits off of somebody?
No, I'd like to see some creativity in the shit talking before a fight. I mean, a lot of this, like, I'm going to knock that bitch out. I mean, how many times have we heard that one? I mean, and when we think of originality, Joshua's not really, he's not really the standard bearer there. But, it is nice in a way to see Anthony Joshua kind of open up and get a little mouthy instead of just, take it and try to be nice. And so that's good. I mean, I think he should even recognize that he's got to do something. He's got to push the bill a bit if he wants to sell himself to American fans. And maybe, talking some more shit will do him some good. But, the whole Uncle Tom thing, a lot of people – I did want to explain this, because – I've seen a lot of British people making a stink about it. Again, personally, I don't care. I really don't care what people say in the pre-fight buildup. Honestly, it doesn't matter. They're just words. Whether they really make a difference inside the ring, most of the times it doesn't. Once the bell rings, you block a lot of that stuff out.
The only time I've seen that make a difference was when Riddick Bowe bitch slapped Larry Donald.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, but
Larry didn't want to fight.
I mean, oftentimes. Yeah, but oftentimes it doesn't, right? And I just wanted to add some context with this is that the thing about Miller, and maybe McCall with Bruno, I don't know. Bruno was popular. I mean, I think, Lewis had a harder time getting his foot in the door with the Brits because, Bruno came across as more genuine and whatnot. And I think, we might see that.
No matter what they think.
Right. Yeah, and I think we're seeing something similar here where Joshua comes across as fake, faker. He comes across as manufactured, more as a company man than Tyson Fury is. Tyson Fury seems to have like an independent streak, and he seems he's his own brand, and he kind of does as he pleases, and that's actually an endearing feature to a lot of Americans, because we have that sort of independent spirit. And with Miller, looking at Joshua as a company man and again manufactured and a bit fake, that's again that doesn't mean he's an Uncle Tom, but you see, like I'm saying, that he's putting that in that sort of context from what I'm gathering. But I mean, again, it's just pre-fight buildup. Whether you get 10 more his own subscribers, I don't really know. I'm not really getting into it just because of that, but. Because I've seen, just browsing around social media, that people by and large view this as a pretty big mismatch. So, again, I'm not sure this pushing and shoving is really going to do the trick.
Yeah, and we talked last night about the possibility of, maybe no Wilder Fury. And today, I was hoping I would wake up and see that they went ahead and signed the fight. But instead, I see top-ranked promoter Bob Arum wants to let the rematch between WBC heavyweight title belt holders Deontay Wilder and, I don't know, I guess you can call him former lineal heavyweight champion Tyson Fury marinate until possibly September, after the two of them have interim fights in order to build up the second fight between them. Arum thinks this can do 2 million pay-per-views if they do.
Well, here goes the marinating thing again. This is the kind of stuff that makes me wish that guys get knocked off along the way. It's like that Felix Sturm effect, I suppose, when they put Bernard Hopkins against Robert Allen for the third time, and then they had Oscar De La Hoya versus Sturm, and Sturm proved to be a live underdog and really should have gotten the decision there. This is the sort of stuff that makes me root against. Guys when they're, just letting it marinate. But I mean, that's kind of Bob Arum's thing. That's what he's been doing for many years. If they have, one fight and then Wilder Fury 2 in September, if Joshua really doesn't have any explicit interest in fighting the winner, then, what else can you do really? But it would be nice for them just to have the fight and then have, Joshua, the winner fight Joshua in September. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's going that route. I don't really know what's going on. I mean, I've been listening to some of the, the insiders, and they're not sure if the fight happens or not. And I guess from what I was listening to is a lot of people who are even friends with Bob Arum and people in Top Rank are surprised by just this whole ordeal. They weren't aware that Fury was going to get a contract like this, and so I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of gray area here, and a lot of us aren't really sure where we're going with this.
Well, and you brought this up last night. He tried to marinate Juan Manuel Lopez against Yuriorkis Gamboa many years ago, and that blew up in his face because, was it Salido beat, Lopez? So it looks like he'd learned his lesson from this.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, a few years ago, he said he wasn't going to let things marinate as often as he did. He said he learned to stop doing that sort of stuff. And, we'd like to see a new example of what he's saying. But, again, I don't know. If you get maybe like Einrenhofer said, we get a Sefer Seferi and, somebody else to bide their time until the rematch. Because imagine if they're fighting in May, then I can't imagine there would be a quick turnaround time for the White and Brazil winner. So I don't know. I know that, again, I was listening to Montero, for instance, and I guess Bob Arum, I guess Top Rank, or maybe it was Frank Warren. I wasn't paying attention too closely, but one of them also got partial rights to Pulev's promotional deal, and I guess a few others. So I guess what that indicated, and maybe some of us should have seen that they were actually building towards, a Tyson Fury, becoming more of an American brand and Top Rank getting more rights to him. But I don't know. I don't know what you do. I mean, I really don't want to see a walkover at this point. I mean, the fight is hot now. Just get it done. But with as much time as is being wasted, I mean, it's February. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen in in May. So maybe they are going to give him somebody soft and get it in September. I don't know. I don't want it, but it's the way of the boxing world.
All right, now here comes my favorite moment of the show. When I go to BoxingNews24.com and I look for an article by Aragon Garcia, who is immortal as being the bitch of Mauricio Sulaiman in the WBC. And the article he wrote today is titled, Canelo Looking Blazing Fast, Training for Jacobs. He puts that Canelo Alvarez is looking amazingly fast at the start of his training for the unification fight against Daniel Jacobs. Canelo looks like he's been training continuously since his impressive third-round TKO. Impressive third-round TKO over WBA World Super Middleweight Champion Rocky Fielding. Aragon calls it the Massacre of the Garden. He then goes on at the end of this to say, Canelo is coming off 3 consecutive impressive performances against champions Rocky Fielding and Gennady Golovkin twice, and looking almost impossible to beat. Jacobs campaigned hard for the fight with Alvarez, and now he's got it. Jacobs is coming into the fight with 4 consecutive poor performances against Triple G, Selecki, Arias, and Deverenchenko. The last time Jacobs really looked good was in his rematch with Sergio Mora in September of 2016.
Jesus, dude, this guy is dick riding hard, isn't he? I mean,
I bet he typed this while Mauricio Sulaiman was fucking him in the ass, and he was blowing Canelo.
Yeah, he was dry humping his life-size Canelo cutout there. This guy is really a shill for the.
Oh God, yes, and I don't know why a reputable boxing site would even print his trash.
Well,
because it's just messed up.
Well, yeah, and their forums are good, but they're not well known for publishing the best articles. But I find it a bit odd that he's saying poor performance on Danny Jacobs' part.
Yeah, I guess Golovkin.
I know quite a few people would say that Jacobs fought Golovkin closer than Alvarez did even both times. I mean,
the only people we know that thought Alvarez were John Ein, Reinhofer, and basically 4 Mexicans.
Yeah, right. Yes, so I don't know. And the Deverenchenko performance, how could you call that poor? I mean, Deverenchenko to me is obviously a damn good fighter. So I thought that was a good performance too. I mean, how do you
consider Sergio Mora a great performance? Because Sergio Mora had nothing left by then anyway.
Well, and Selecki and Golovkin, obviously, and Deverenchenko are all good fighters. I mean, hell, Selecki fought, who was it, Hugo Centeno Jr., and beat him clearer than, who was it? Damn it, I can't even think of it now. But I mean, they're all good fighters, and he beat every single one of them. There's no shame in the performances that he gave for any of those fighters, in my opinion. So I don't really know what he's talking about. Maybe he's trying to sow doubt, in the 5 viewers that he gets. I'm not sure what's going on. I mean, when you're titling an article, he looks fast. I mean, okay, all right. Well, he always looks
fast.
Well, and I mean, 3 champions, right? All right, he's fought 3 fights with 3 consecutive champions. Come on, man. If you consider Rocky Fielding a champion,
you're an idiot.
Just stop it. Just stop the shit.
All right, next up, the WBO has made Gennady Golovkin the mandatory contender for Demetrius Andrade. Of course, we've heard about Triple G 2-fight deal, $45 million for the zone. And now it looks like he could be possibly fighting Andrade. I think in lieu of a Canelo matchup, I think this is the best way for Golovkin to safely go fighting one of the better fighters, because I'm not convinced Andrade is that great.
No, I'm not either. I mean, I thought when he was coming up, and actually if you look at the first time that he broke the top 10, I think at 154, I think was 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, so this is a guy who's done little of note in that time. I mean, what he beat, I don't know, Willie Nelson. I mean, he struggled with Jack Colkay. Andrade looks like he's pretty damn talented at spots, but he just doesn't put it together consistently. I mean, he's never been fighting consistently. His career it's felt like it's been a waste in many regards. But if he fights Golovkin, I think that's an interesting fight. Of course, it's politically convenient too that all of a sudden Golovkin is announced as the mandatory for Andrade. It's clear as damn day that this is all political. But Golovkin is.
You know what? Unlike She-Fat or whoever that guy we talked about last night is fighting Billy Joe Saunders. At least there is a good argument for Golovkin to be ranked number one.
Yeah, right. Well, exactly. Well, I think there's still a decent argument to say that Golovkin is still the best middleweight in the world, even at an advanced age. I mean,
because he won both fights.
Right. Yeah, that's how most people feel. I'm on board with you, but it's okay. I mean, I don't mind it. I mean, if you have Golovkin, or I mean, if you have Alvarez versus Jacobs, that's the 1 and number 3 guy. I'm all good with that. And then Andrade is a worthwhile opponent. I mean, especially if you're potentially getting a third fight with Alvarez, Andrade is surely enough at this point, and I wouldn't mind seeing it. I mean, I think. Golovkin would be favored in that one. Andrade's skilled. He's a southpaw. Be interesting to see Golovkin against another southpaw because it's been a while. So I wouldn't mind the fight at all. I mean, I don't know if it brings in 10 more DAZN subscribers, but I don't mind it.
7 or 8.
Yeah, 7 or 8. Right? Yeah, he doesn't have quite the backing that Anthony Joshua does, but no, it's a good fight. I mean, I think. It'd be interesting to see if Golovkin can track down a pretty quick southpaw at this juncture in his career. I mean, he is 37 years old now. See whether that jab will neutralize Andrade's movement, whether it can break him down to the body and get him out of there. I mean, I think it would still do quite a bit for his brand if he was able to stop a guy like Andrade, because Andrade is a top 10 middleweight. So I'd look forward to that. I guess we just need to see what Golovkin's side thinks, because I haven't heard much from him. I haven't really heard anything from him in a while.
Yeah, and the other thing about it is if he fights Andrade and wins, if Canelo wants all the belts, he's got to go fight Golovkin again then, because he'd have the only belt that Canelo doesn't own if he beats Jacobs.
Yeah, and we even when Billy Joe Saunders held that title, both of them didn't seem like they seemed like at one point they would work Saunders into their plans. So, to me, it wasn't any fear of Saunders itself. It was, like they'll get around to collecting all the trinkets and then it would only make sense, right? I mean, when you try to have some foresight here, okay, so once if Alvarez beats Jacobs, or if Jacobs beats Alvarez, right? I mean, that's not far-fetched.
Yeah, it is. Because they have to knock him out, and that's far-fetched because they're not giving him a decision.
Yeah, I know. After all that big money they paid Alvarez,
maybe a draw, because then you can have a rematch and sell that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. So yeah, whoever wins that fight, probably Canelo, he'll have 3 of the 4 trinkets, and then. This will denote the 4th. So, it would only make sense. It would actually make financial sense for these guys as well to say, hey, well, now we're having a 3rd fight between Alvarez and Golovkin, and it's going to be for all the trinkets, right? All the belts. So that would be convenient there. So I guess in a way, this makes some sense in that way too.
All right. On this day, I know we got a couple things to talk about since there's not a lot of boxing news.
Yeah, on this day. So I went with there was a number of them, but a number of lower level type stuff. But we're going with Tommy the Duke Morrison versus Pinklin Thomas. And Pinklin is a guy that we've had on, and we've actually had Trisha Morrison on as well. So, go back and check those out. But this is a Morrison building his resume. I believe he was 25-0 with 21 knockouts at the point. At that point, I could be wrong, but this resulted, I think, in a stoppage, which may have been a cut to Pinklin Thomas. I'm trying to remember here. But I was pretty impressed with Morrison. I mean, obviously Thomas was past his best, and maybe I don't know what you think on this. I'm sure Thomas does a lot better if he's in his prime, but I think he was like 31-5 at that juncture. But the one thing that I really liked about Morrison in this fight was, Thomas didn't really exhibit much in the way of lateral movement, but Thomas was, he was flicking his jab out there. He was moving his head pretty well. And the most notable thing that I noticed was he was really banging the left hook to the body real damn well. I mean, and he was putting it in combinations too. So there are many spots where he would hit him with a 1-2 and then just bring the left hook right, under the elbow, and you could see that it was bothering Thomas the whole way through.
Yeah, and if I remember right, Thomas retired in between the first and second rounds. He got a really bad cut during that first round. And yeah, let's get this out of the way right now. When I watch Tommy Morrison fight, now, when you go back and watch the film, he would have beat the hell out of anybody that's fighting right now. Just that simple. He was a skilled big man, and if you want proof of that, a lot of people hear about him, they think about the big hook, and that's it. But it's just not true. He was a very talented boxer. This is a man that boxed the ears off of George Foreman 2 years before George Foreman won the heavyweight championship in the world, or a year before. Foreman couldn't corner him, and I mean, he used lateral movement there. He slipped, he moved, he landed the jab. I mean, he threw combinations. We don't see that many heavyweights throw combinations right now. And I swear, if Deontay Wilder was to fight prime Tommy Morrison, it would last about a round, because Morrison would, he would slip one, throw a 3-punch combination, it would be over. And the big thing is, everybody remembers the HIV thing with Morrison. Whether that's true or not is up for debate, too. As you said, we had Tricia Morrison on, and there are a lot of things there that scream that maybe something else was up. But this was right after, if I think about it, I think he fought James Quick Tillis to fight before this. And I think he fought Yuri Vaulin after that. And Vaulin was a Russian that was supposed to be something. Didn't end up being anything, and I think Vaulin may have fought on the undercard of Spinks Cooney in '87, but I'm not sure. And then, of course, he goes and he fights Merciless Ray Mercer, and he beat the hell out of Mercer for 4 rounds, and then Mercer knocked him out. One of the most violent combinations you're ever going to see, Jeremiah.
Yeah, that's a pretty famous stoppage win right there. But it is worth noting that Mercer had an iron chin. He's hard to dent. And he was a damn good fighter, and he caught up with Tommy. But like you said, Tommy was doing really damn well in that fight. It's not as if people get too caught up. It's like the Pernell Whitaker thing we were talking about last night. People get too caught up in the defensive stuff. Like you said with Morrison, they get too caught up in the the left hook, which was fantastic. The guy was explosive. If he connected, he'd get you right out of there. But that takes away from the ability that he did have. He made it look a lot easier against George Foreman than tons of guys did. Maybe I'm off here. I thought he made it look easier than Evander Holyfield did. It's been a long time since I saw that fight.
Because Holyfield basically stood in front of him and took the blows. Morrison didn't. Morrison gave him lateral movement, and he won the fight 8-4 in my estimation, if not 9-3.
Yeah, and that was a good performance, and maybe it's underrated as well because. Like we're saying, it is underrated in the sense that people aren't really bringing it up when they talk about old George Foreman. And a lot of people really like old George Foreman and what he was able to accomplish and how he became
that performance.
Right, yeah, because of what ultimately happened to Tommy, I suppose. His chin was exposed as not being great, and people kind of rest their arguments on that, and that's fine. That is one thing that usually knocks a guy off from the top rungs of the ladder. But, the way he was able to do it was pretty damn good against Foreman. Old George just couldn't keep up with him. And, like you said, it was a clear decision and the best performance of his life. And you were talking about the Yulin or the Russian guy that he ended up beat.
Yeah. A little bit of trouble, too, if I remember right. I'm not 100% sure, but.
Yeah, from what I remember, I think you're right. And Yulin, I think he had like 250 plus amateur fights and won like 230 of them. I can't quite remember. I guess I could hop on BoxRec and take a look. But that was a guy who had a ton of amateur experience. And funny in a way was kind of moved like a lot of these guys nowadays, where they were just like, hey, throw him in the deep end and see if he drowns. But no, Tommy swam, obviously.
Yeah, that was on the undercard. I know where I'm thinking this now. Yuri Vaulin and Tommy Morrison was on the undercard from the Trump Taj Mahal of the Foreman Holyfield fight. And Vaulin went into that fight. He got upset by a guy by the name of John Sargent at the Forum, and he came into the fight 9-1, 10-1, something like that. And then Tommy beat him. And I know that Tommy got a lot of grief from the performance because I think Vaulin was a southpaw, and I think that was the first time Morrison had fought a southpaw, and he did have trouble with Vaulin. He ended up stopping him after that, though. So that was the thing about Morrison, though. The thing that I always remember about Morrison, I don't know, have you ever seen him against Carl the Truth Williams?
No, I don't think so.
You young kids. But yeah, he fought Carl Williams on an undercard, I think it was a Foreman fight. But he fought Carl the Truth Williams, and Carl the Truth Williams was a talented dude. Morrison got knocked down twice in like the 4th or 5th round, came back, stopped Carl the Truth Williams in like the 8th round. It was a great fight, and I think on the judges' cards, I think Williams was actually winning by a split decision at the time that Morrison knocked him out in the 8th round. And that's another guy that was very talented. Carl the Truth Williams, a lot of guys thought that his career was over, but he still had one good one left in him. And the Williams win is basically what got him the fight against George Foreman. And, of course, he beat Foreman, and he defended that title. And I remember this because I remember watching this on ESPN. He beat Tim Tomaszek. Now, Tim Tomaszek going in was like 34-10. But the story was, I'm not sure if I'm wrong. You can correct me on Twitter or whatever and tell me I'm an idiot. But Tomaszek was the guy that they pulled out of the crowd because the guy that was supposed to fight him, I think, was Mike Williams. Now, in 1990, Tommy Morrison fought Mike Williams in Rocky V. That was Union Kane was Mike Williams. So they were supposed to fight. This was supposed to be a big fight. It was on ESPN. They were fighting it at the Kemper Arena in Kansas City. And Mike Williams, for some reason, the day of the fight, refused to fight. And he probably remembered how bad Tommy Gunn beat him up when he was Union Kane. But basically, they found out that Tomaszek was a professional boxer. They pulled him out. They put him back. They got him dressed, wrapped his hands, and he came out, and he fought for the WBO World Heavyweight title, which tops any Rocky movie you'll ever find.
Yep. Yes, sir.
And Tomaszek actually put up a little bit of a fight. He made it to the 4th round, which was better than a lot of people. And then you get 2 months after that, Michael Bent, who we've had on the show before, the Boxing Legends show. He's a great guy. It was a great interview. I suggest everybody go to GoodRulingTruth.net and check that out. Bent was a great amateur, was a huge underdog in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in Tommy's backyard, came out, upset Tommy with a first-round knockout. And there, Tommy kind of disappeared, fought guys that really weren't that good. He got a shot against Razor Ruddock, which if you haven't seen that fight, you need to watch it because that was an absolute war.
Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like the quality of fights has gone down over the years. But I will say that in terms of heavyweights, we both acknowledge, and I think a lot of people should, that the overall talent level is not what it used to be. And you did have good fights more often, but I do think they're doing a pretty good job of pairing these guys to get the most of what they've got right now. But yeah, I mean, Tommy versus these guys nowadays, I mean, go watch the fights. I mean, like I say, time and time again, go watch the fights, right? Don't get caught up in these highlight reel videos, where you're going to lack the nuance of what a guy can do and what he can't do. I mean, again, look at the Pinklin-Thomas fight. Yeah, Thomas was old, right? But Morrison moved his head better than anybody does today. Maybe outside of, Povetkin is pretty good with that stuff. He was a big-time amateur. But Povetkin is one of the very few modern heavyweights who knows how to move his head. And Morrison is clearly better than just about anybody today. He was at his best, of course. I mean, but yeah, go watch the fight. I mean, he would throw 1-2, he would slip left, slip right. His accuracy was good. His punches were technically sharp. I mean, the dude was a damn good fighter, and I'm with you. I mean, I think he could be a champ in the modern era.
Yeah, I don't even think that's questionable. All right, did you want to bring up anything else on this day, or you want to wrap it up?
Well, it's kind of hard, I mean, the other on this day was a notable fight in the Humberto Gonzalez Michael Carbajal rematch. And, that was, I think, the first fight, or maybe it was the second fight. Again, correct me on Twitter, if you will. But I think the first fight was the first $1 million payday for guys that small. What are they, junior flyweights? So
Well,
it
I
was
don't know
108
if it
pounds.
was $1 million payday, but what I do know is it was the first light flyweight fight in history to head a pay-per-view card.
Okay, yeah, and I thought they ended up getting paid real damn well too. It's not often that you can get guys that small, who are, can generate that sort of revenue and actually do pay-per-view fights themselves. But the first fight was damn good. The second fight was damn good too. But Gonzalez showed that he had Carvajal's number and he boxed nicely. And Carvajal just had a problem tracking him down and getting to him. And yeah, he just didn't, he couldn't connect on his hard punches enough. Gonzalez's lateral movement kind of helped him out there, and Gonzalez was a scrappy guy who would just, he would get in there and bore in and throw these punches from different angles and mess with you. And Carbajal was more of the boxer, right? He had a long amateur background. Hell, was he Olympian?
Yes,
Damn,
he won the Olympic gold medal in 1988, I believe.
Yeah, some of these things get fuzzy over time, but yeah, I mean, he's more the technical boxer, and he was obviously a good puncher himself, but he got fought by Gonzalez,
Yeah,
and
he won
Gonzalez.
The gold. Yeah, he won. I'm pretty sure he won the gold in 1988. That's what made this fight so big, because Carvajal, the story was so great where he came from in the barrio, and he kind of captured America's imagination a little bit, and that's what blew this fight up. And I'm not sure, but I think the second fight, and I'm not sure, I'm not looking this up, so I think the second fight was the first fight where they both got $1 million, and I think the first fight was the first pay-per-view fight of that weight class. So they covered two things over their first two historic fights. It turned into probably the greatest trilogy in the history of the 108-pound division.
Yeah, well, and Gonzalez actually proved to be the better of the two, at least, between them. Of course, there's still an argument to be made, whether Carbajal was the greater fighter, but Gonzalez was the better fighter. And, I still find it disappointing that 108 even existed back then. And, I know we go on about the weight classes and whatnot, but if you look at the era, I mean, Ricardo Lopez fought around that time too. But he didn't end up fighting either one of these guys. Yuri Arbachikov was at 112. He was technically a division higher. He didn't get to fight any of these guys. Mark Too Sharp Johnson, came a little bit later. But
well, I think with Lopez, he was a Don King guy, and I think Don King was trying to protect that zero on the end of his record to make him more marketable to the American audience.
Yeah, well, and I guess you understand that if you're peering through the lenses of a promoter, but if you fight Gonzalez or Carbajal, to me, again, maybe not as a promoter, but to me that does far more for your legacy.
Yeah, then you're an all-time great, and I know everybody thinks he is Ricardo Lopez, but he's not.
No, he's not.
I mean, he just didn't beat anybody, and the opportunity there to fight people that could have made him an all-time great was there. So don't give me anything about he was 105. There's no way he could make 108 and be successful. That's
well, and he also did fight at 108 pounds. I mean, eventually he did move up,
he wasn't going to fight those guys though, because Michael Carbajal and Humberto Gonzalez would have ate his ass alive.
But it would have just been real nice to see. I mean, and this is the problem with boxing. Again, I'm going to go over this because I wrote it in an article. Check that out too, right? It's about how all these divisions have really ruined potential golden eras. So, I brought up this example where if 105 and 108 didn't exist, you would have had Ricardo Lopez, Humberto Gonzalez, Michael Carbajal, Mark Too Sharp Johnson, and Yuri Arbachikov competing alongside one another. And the only guys who fought out of all of them were Gonzalez and Carbajal. So you've got to note that in your book. I mean, yeah, it looks nice when you have a shiny zero in the loss column, and You're the man at 105, and the division was brand new. There was hardly anybody to fight. And go watch the fight itself. I mean, I did decide to watch. I watched damn near Ricardo Lopez's career a few years back because I wanted to see what all the all the fuss is about. And he was an excellent technician. There's no doubt about that. He could box a bit. He could brawl a bit. I mean, he was a technician. He was like a he was a Nacho Beristain guy. He had that style. He was a bit like Juan Manuel Marquez, but he didn't beat anybody that is going to be inducted in the Hall of Fame or should be inducted in the Hall of Fame. I mean, there was a lot of no-hopers on that resume, and you got to put that into context. And the thing about it is Lopez was a damn good fighter, but he's not the best fighter that Nacho Beristain has ever had. Juan Manuel Marquez is the better fighter. That win over Pacquiao, even if there are question marks surrounding that, all of the fights were razor thin. That trumps anything that Ricardo Lopez did in his career. And it's just a damn shame that he didn't get any of those guys. He didn't get Carvajal, didn't get Johnson, didn't get any of those guys. And it's funny because a lot of people do say that. I even see it on the forums where they're like, oh, well, how would Lopez do at 112? And then they talk about how these guys at 112 would have been too big for him. Well, no, not really. I mean, look at Lopez's size. He was something like, what was he, like 5'6", 5'7", which was pretty damn tall for the weight class. Yeah. Okay, so he was taller than Arbachikov, I think, by an inch or two. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was taller than Gonzalez as well. I mean, come on. That amount of weight was not going to make an ounce of difference. And look at guys like Jimmy Wild. Jimmy Wild is widely seen as the best flyweight ever. The dude was barely 100 pounds, and he was beating the crap out of guys who were 112 and bigger. And I understand it's a different period in the sense that you get to weigh in. But back then, I'm pretty sure the weigh-ins were the day of the fight. Still, yeah, I could be mistaken there.
They were the day of the fight.
So come on, there's not that big of a difference. He could have competed against any one of those guys, and we would have seen how good he really was.
Well, he could always ride a horse in a derby. We could have saw if he was a multi-sport athlete like Deion Sanders and Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
All right.
Mexican legend.
You want to talk about anything else before we wrap it up for tonight?
No, I just want to tell people, that they can find us on, Spotify, Spreaker, YouTube, TuneIn, Stitcher, anywhere you can find sports podcasts, you can find us, and be sure to rate, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And as I always say, give us some feedback. I mean, if you want to come on the show, if you're listening, you want to come on the show and debate a certain topic, I'm in for it. Mike's in for it. If you want to spice things up a bit, I'm for it. I mean, whatever adds value to the listener, I'm in, Mike's in. Just give us a ring.
All right, guys. I want to remind you tomorrow, Survive in Advance with me and Steve Risley, we will have Michael Waddell, who is the president of the Orlando Apollos of the new AAF. He'll be in to take questions and answer questions about the Orlando Apollos, who currently are the first-place team in the new AAF. Thursday, we'll have Evelyn Magley, who is the CEO and commissioner of the Basketball League, which is I think they're in their second year, which is a minor league basketball league, which actually high level of play. They've been drawing a ton of people to their games. They're doing a great job there. On Friday, Brian Ralph will be with us to talk college basketball. And tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live on thegruelingtruth.net, you can hear our newest NFL Legends show with former Pro Bowl safety from the Cincinnati Bengals, David Fulcher, who made a big hit in Super Bowl 23 against Ronnie Lott. It was one of the best safeties of the 1980s. And he's a hard get because he's never done an interview with anybody after his career. But you will hear it tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Eastern on thegruelingtruth.net. I want to remind you, as Jeremiah said, you can hear all of our shows on Spreaker, iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, YouTube, Spotify. Everywhere you hear sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. We will catch you tomorrow night at 11 o'clock Eastern, where the legends speak.